The bass in the Golden Nebula lounge did not just vibrate the floor. It rattled the fillings in Sawyer Cade's teeth. It was a synthetic, overprocessed thrum that smelled of ozone and cheap pheromone mist. Sawyer sat in a booth upholstered in mock velvet that had been scrubbed too many times nursing a glass of water he had paid 15 credits for and regretted every single life choice that had led him to this specific coordinate in space and time. He checked his wrist chrono. It was 1900 hours and 12 minutes. "You are doing great, Dad. You look approachable but mysterious, like a brooding hero in a holovid," a voice chirped in his ear. Sawyer tapped the small audio bead wedged in his right ear canal. "I look like a man who is about to commit a felony against a matchmaker algorithm, Maisie. I am going home." "No, you are not," his daughter's voice came back sharp and crackling with the interference of the station's lower levels. "Damien paid the subscription fee for 6 months. You promised Uncle Damien you would try. One date, just one. If she does not show up by 1915, you can bail. 3 minutes, Dad. Hold the line." Sawyer sighed, the sound lost in the cacophony of the lounge. Around him, the social mixer was in full swing. It was a meat market for the lonely and the desperate on Hearthlight Freeport, a neutral station drifting in the void between the civilized core worlds and the lawless frontier. Here, species from a dozen sectors mingled under strobing purple lights, looking for connection or just a distraction from the crushing emptiness of space. Sawyer was not looking for connection. He was looking for the exit. He was a human war veteran turned animal medic, a man who spent his days patching up livestock and exopets. His heart was a closed circuit fused shut years ago. He did not date. He did not hope. He survived. He stared at the empty seat opposite him. The table was small, designed for an intimate conversation between two people. 2 minutes, he muttered to the air. "And then I am going back to the clinic to sterilize the surgical tools." He watched the crowd. A group of dock workers laughed loudly near the bar. A pair of avian scholars preened their feathers in the corner. Then the sensory overload of the room seemed to spike. The air pressure shifted a subtle change that made the hair on Sawyer's arm stand up. It was a feeling he had not felt since the war, the prickly heat of incoming kinetic energy. He began to stand up. "Time is up, Maisie. I am leaving." "Dad, wait." Sawyer froze. They were not walking, they were prowling. Through the crush of the crowd, two figures cut a path with an intensity that made the other patrons scatter like startled fish. They were Felisar. Sawyer knew the species. Feline humanoids, graceful, lethal, and usually solitary. But these two were moving in a phalanx formation. The one on the left, Sable, was tall, her fur a sleek midnight black that seemed to absorb the lounge's gaudy lighting. Her eyes were gold coins slitted and scanning every threat vector in the room. She wore a heavy traveler's cloak that did not quite conceal the hard lines of composite armor beneath. The one on the right, Maris, was slightly shorter, her fur a patterned mix of cream and tawny brown. She looked softer, but her hand was hovering near her hip right where a holster would be if weapons were allowed in the lounge. But it was not the two women that made Sawyer's jaw tighten. It was what, or rather who, was trailing in their wake. Attached to their cloaks, clutching their hands, and stumbling behind them, were children. 5 of them. It was a chaotic train of small limbs, twitching ears and wide eyes. There were 3 Felisar kits and 2 human children, all dressed in mismatched oversized clothing that looked like it had been scavenged from a lost-and-found bin. Sawyer stood fully, his instinct screaming at him to flank left and vanish. But the black-furred woman, Sable, locked eyes with him. It was a physical impact like a target lock. They marched straight to his booth. Sable stopped at the table. She did not say hello. She did not apologize for being late. She simply swept her arm out, herding the 5 children into the booth. "Sit," she commanded. Her voice was a low rasp, like gravel sliding over silk. The children scrambled. They squeezed into the bench opposite Sawyer. Then, they squeezed in next to him. A small human boy with messy hair jammed his elbow into Sawyer's ribs. A Felisar girl with tufted ears crawled under the table. Sable and Maris stood at the end of the table looming over him. The booth, designed for 2 people, now contained 8. Sawyer looked at the chaos. He looked at Sable. "I think there has been a mistake. The reservation was for 2. Sable ignored him. She reached into the folds of her cloak and pulled out a heavy rectangular block of data crystal. It was old, tech military grade, the kind used for secure courier drops. She slammed it onto the table with a thud that made the water glass jump. "Sawyer, Cade," Sable said. It was not a question. "Maybe," Sawyer said, his eyes narrowing. "Who is asking?" "The algorithm," Maris said. She stepped forward, her cream-colored tail flicking anxiously behind her. She looked exhausted. Beneath the glamour of the club lights, Sawyer could see the dark circles under her eyes and the way her ears were pinned back in stress. "We ran the parameters. We filtered through 4 billion profiles across 3 sectors. We inputted the survival variables, the psychological profiles of the children, and the threat level." She pointed a clawed finger at him. "You are the perfect match." Sawyer stared at her. Then he stared at the data block. A holographic projection flickered to life above the crystal. It displayed his face, a younger version from his service record, and a rotating DNA helix that matched his own. Below it, in flashing red letters, were the words, "Primary Guardian Candidate Confirmed." Sawyer felt a cough build in his throat. He took a sip of water and choked on it. "I am a... what?" he sputtered, wiping water from his chin. "A perfect match," Maris repeated, her voice desperate. "For us. For them." Sawyer looked at the children. The boy next to him was wiping his nose on Sawyer's sleeve. The girl under the table was tying his shoelaces together. Across the table, a Felisar boy with heterochromatic eyes, one blue, one green, was staring at Sawyer with terrifying intensity. "Lady," Sawyer said, his voice dry as the deserts of Mars. "You have the wrong guy. I am not a match for anyone. I cannot even match with the coffee machine in my own clinic. It burns the brew 60% of the time just to spite me." "The machine lacks motivation," Sable said coldly. "We do not." Dad!" Maisie's voice buzzed in his ear, breathless. "Do not hang up. This is getting interesting. Are those kids, please? Tell me those are kids." "They are kids," Sawyer muttered. "Are you talking to yourself?" the human girl across from him asked. She looked to be about 8 years old, with sharp eyes that reminded him of Maisie. "Because that is a sign of instability. We need stability. Sable said so." Sawyer looked at the girl. "I am talking to my daughter, who is currently safe at home where you all should be." "We do not have a home," the girl said matter-of-factly. Her name tag pinned crookedly to her collar read Nova. "We have a file, and we have you. Are you going to feed us? Milo is hungry. He is always hungry." She pointed to the small Felisar boy, who was currently trying to chew on the edge of the table. "I am not feeding anyone," Sawyer said, panic rising in his chest. "I am leaving." "If you say no," Maisie whispered in his ear, "I will tell everyone about the time you cried watching the season finale of Star-Crossed Lovers and sang the theme song in the kitchen while making toast." Sawyer stiffened. "That is blackmail." "That is leverage," Maisie corrected. Sawyer looked back at Sable. "Look, I do not know what kind of scam this is, or what kind of new parenting outsourcing app you are using, but I am a vet. I fix broken legs on horses and cure mange on lizards. I do not do whatever this is." He gestured to the pile of children. Sable leaned down. Her face was inches from his. Up close, the smell of ozone was overpowered by something else. Something distinct and alarming. Copper. Sawyer inhaled sharply. It was the smell of fresh blood, metallic and raw. He looked closer. The heavy cloak Sable wore was not just for style. On the left shoulder, The fabric was scorched, the fibers fused together by a high-heat plasma graze. And on Maris's sleeve there was a dark, wet patch hidden in the pattern of the fabric. They were not just tired. They were hurt. "We are not asking for a date, Sawyer Cade," Sable hissed her voice, low enough that only he could hear. "We are asking for sanctuary. The file says you can provide it. It says you are the only one who can." "Why me?" Sawyer asked, his voice dropping to match hers. The soldier in him was waking up, shaking off the dust of civilian life. He scanned the room, no longer looking for an exit, but looking for threats. "Because," Marius whispered, leaning in from the other side, "you are the one who wrote the encryption on the file." Sawyer froze. "I did not write any file." "Not you," Sable said. "But the code it reacts to you. It led us here." Suddenly the music in the lounge shifted. The heavy bass track cut out, replaced by a high-pitched, discordant chime. The lights did not dim, but they changed spectrum. The purple party lights washed out, replaced by a harsh, white scanning grid that swept across the crowd. Sawyer knew that grid. It was a biometric sweep, high-frequency, military-grade. "Dr. Cade," the voice of the station AI announced pleasantly over the speakers. "Security sweep in progress. Please remain seated." It was a lie. The station did not do random sweeps during peak commercial hours. Sawyer looked at the entrance. 4 men had entered. They wore the nondescript gray armor of private security contractors, but they moved with the precision of a liquidation squad. They were checking faces. They were checking heat signatures. They were looking for 7 specific heat signatures. "They found us," Maris gasped. Her ears flattened completely against her skull. "Rusk's men. They are here." "Who is Rusk?" Sawyer asked, though he was already moving. "The man who wants the file," Sable said. She reached for a weapon beneath her cloak, but Sawyer's hand shot out and clamped over her wrist. "No," Sawyer ordered. His voice was no longer dry. It was steel. "You draw a weapon in here, the station turrets will shred us before you clear the holster. There are civilians everywhere." "They will take the children," Sable snarled, her pupils dilated to black discs. "Not if we move," Sawyer said. He tapped his earbud. "Maisie, I need a route. Access the service schematics for the Gilded Nebula. I need a way out that does not go through the front door." "On it," Maisie said, her voice instantly losing its playful tone. "Kitchens are back right. There is a refuse chute that connects to the sub-level maintenance tunnels. It is going to smell bad, Dad." "We are past smelling good," Sawyer said. He stood up, grabbing the data block from the table. "Everyone up, now." "Are we getting food?" Milo, the hungry Felisar boy, asked. "We are getting out," Sawyer said. He looked at Nova, the human girl who seemed to be the ringleader of the miniature circus. "Nova, right, you take the little one's hand. Do not let go. If he stops, you drag him." Nova nodded, her face solemn. She grabbed the hand of the smallest child, a human toddler named Pip, who was staring at the disco lights in a trance. "Move," Sawyer commanded. He grabbed Sable's arm and steered her toward the kitchen doors. Maris heralded the children from behind. They moved as a single, awkward organism pushing through the crowd of dancers. "Hey, watch it!" a patron yelled as Sawyer shoved him aside. "Medical emergency," Sawyer barked. "Contagious fungal outbreak, very itchy." "Move." The crowd parted instantly. They burst into the kitchen. It was a chaotic symphony of sizzling pans, shouting chefs, and steam. A large droid with 6 arms was chopping vegetables at blinding speed. "No entry," the droid blared. "Staff only. Health inspector," Sawyer yelled, flashing an old ID badge that expired 6 years ago. "This ventilation is non-compliant." He didn't wait for the droid to process the lie. He led the group to the back, past the industrial ovens, to a heavy blast door, marked Waste Disposal. Authorized personnel only. He slammed his hand on the keypad. It denied him. Maisie! Bypassing 321. Maisie counted down. The light turned green. The door hissed open, revealing a dark, cavernous tunnel that smelled of recycled air and old grease. In, Sawyer said. Sable hesitated. This is a garbage chute. It is a tactical egress point, Sawyer corrected. Go. He shoved them inside and followed, sealing the door, just as the kitchen doors behind them burst open. Through the small, reinforced window, he saw the gray armored men storm into the kitchen, their rifles raised. They were safe, for about 30 seconds. The tunnel was dimly lit by emergency strips on the floor. It was wide enough for maintenance carts, which meant they could run. Keep moving, Sawyer said, taking the lead. We need to get to the transit hub on level 4. My clinic is on the outer rim. If we can get there, I can lock down the perimeter. You have a perimeter? Sable asked, falling into stride beside him. She was limping slightly, favoring her left leg. I have heavy blast shutters and a very temperamental atmospheric seal, Sawyer said. It will have to do. They ran. The sound of their boots and the children's lighter footsteps echoed in the metal tube. The children were surprisingly quiet, as if they were used to running, used to being hunted. That realization made a cold knot form in Sawyer's stomach. Who are you people? Sawyer asked, his breath hitching slightly. And do not give me that perfect match garbage. We are the babysitters, Maris panted from the back, carrying the toddler Pip, who had decided his legs were done for the day. We worked at the orphanage on Colony 7. When Rusk's liquidation order came down, we took the ones we could. Liquidation order? Sawyer nearly stopped. Colony 7 is a protected sanctuary. Not anymore, Sable said grimly. Not since they found the archives. Praetor Rusk decided that Felisar orphans were biologically non-essential expenses. He wanted the facility cleared. We wanted them alive. Sawyer swore under his breath. Praetor Halden Rusk. He knew the name. A rising star in the interplanetary coalition. A man who preached order and efficiency. A man who cleaned up messes. And the file? Sawyer asked, glancing at the block in his hand. We stole it from Rusk's private server before we left, Sable said. We did not know what it was. We just knew it was the only file heavily encrypted enough to be important. We thought it was blackmail material, money. And instead it was a dating profile, Sawyer asked skeptically. It decrypted itself when we entered the neutral zone, Maris said. It changed. It became a directive. Find Sawyer Cade. He is the match. That is all it said. Sawyer looked down at the data block. As his fingers brushed against the smooth surface, the device pulsed. A soft blue light emanated from the core, syncing with the rhythm of his heartbeat. Suddenly a sensation washed over him. It was not pain. It was a memory. He felt a hand on his shoulder, a phantom touch, warm, firm, and familiar. He smelled lavender and engine grease, the specific scent of his wife Elena. Elena, who had died 5 years ago in a shuttle accident that was listed as pilot error. Sawyer stumbled, bracing himself against the tunnel wall. The world spun. Sawyer. Sable grabbed his arm, her claws digging into his jacket. We cannot stop. Sawyer shook his head, trying to clear the fog. The sensation faded, leaving him cold. He looked at the file. The light dimmed, but the screen now displayed a new line of text. Biometric lock disengaged. Level 1, access granted. It recognized you, Sable whispered, her eyes wide. It really is you. I did not write this, Sawyer said, his voice shaking. But I know who did. Who? Someone who has been dead for 5 years, Sawyer whispered. A heavy boom echoed through the tunnel behind them. The blast door had been breached. Discussion later, Sawyer snapped, shoving the file into his pocket. The ghost of Elena's touch was still tingling on his skin, but he shoved that down too. He was a soldier. He had a mission. "Move! Double time! If you cannot run, carry someone who can." He scooped up the Felisar boy, Milo, who looked like he was about to collapse. The kid was heavier than he looked, a solid weight of bone and fur. Milo clung to Sawyer's neck, burying his face in Sawyer's collar. "You smell like antiseptic," Milo mumbled. "Better than garbage," Sawyer grunted. They sprinted through the labyrinth of the station's guts. Sawyer led them with a map that existed only in his head, a relic of the days when he helped build the station's ventilation grid as a contractor. He took them up a service ladder through a hydroponics bay that smelled of damp earth, and finally out onto the walkway of Sector 9. His clinic was at the end of the concourse, a small repurposed cargo container with a neon sign that read Cade Veterinary Services. No questions asked. "There," Sawyer pointed. They ran across the open deck. The few pedestrians out at this hour scattered at the sight of the two armed Felisar women and the stampede of children. Sawyer reached the door and slammed his palm against the scanner. "Cade Sawyer, Code Blue Protocol 0. The door slid open. He ushered them inside Sable Maris 5 kids and a whole universe of trouble. As soon as the last tail was inside, Sawyer hit the emergency lock. Heavy Durasteel shutters slammed down over the windows and the door, sealing them in with a thunderous clang. Silence fell over the clinic. The only sound was the hum of the air cycler and the heavy breathing of 7 people. Sawyer leaned his back against the door, sliding down until he hit the floor. He looked at the group, huddled in the center of his waiting room. The children were looking at the jars of animal treats on the counter. Sable was checking her plasma burns. Maris was counting heads. "Welcome to the Cade Motel," Sawyer rasped. "Checkout time is never." "Dad," Maisie's voice came through the earbuds, soft and worried. "I tracked the security chatter. Rusk has issued a station-wide bounty. He is calling them biological terrorists. And he listed you as an abducted hostage." "Of course he did," Sawyer closed his eyes. "That way he can shoot them to save me." He opened his eyes and looked at the data block in his hand. The blue light pulsed once slow and steady like a heartbeat. He had gone to a mixer to find a date. Instead, he had found a ghost, a war, and a family he did not want. Sawyer Cade stood up. He walked over to the coffee machine in the corner, which was hissing aggressively. He kicked it once hard. It gurgled and spat out a stream of perfect black coffee. "Okay," Sawyer said, turning to face the 2 alien women and the 5 staring children. "First rule of this house, don't touch the surgical lasers. Second rule, if you are hungry, there is protein paste in the pantry. Third rule." He held up the glowing file. "You are going to tell me exactly how you got this file, and then we are going to figure out how to use it to burn Halden Rusk to the ground." Sable smiled. It was a sharp, dangerous smile that showed all her teeth. "I think we really did find the perfect match," Sawyer grunted. "Don't push it. I still haven't decided if I am keeping you." You will," the little girl Nova said, climbing onto an exam chair and spinning around. "You fix the coffee machine. That means you can fix us." Sawyer looked at the machine, then at the girl. He felt that familiar ache in his chest, the one that usually meant he was about to do something stupid and heroic. "Maisie," he said into the comms, "get the guest blankets out of storage, and tell Damien to bring his shotgun. We have company." The clinic was designed for treating sick livestock and the occasional injured dock worker, not for housing a refugee crisis involving 2 adult Felisar and 5 traumatized children. The space, usually sterile and smelling of ozone and disinfectant, had transformed into a claustrophobic ecosystem of quiet chaos. Sawyer Cade stood in the center of what used to be his living area, a space now occupied by a makeshift fortress of pillows, thermal blankets, and medical crash mats. He held a clipboard in one hand and a scanner in the other, trying to impose military order on a situation that was fundamentally ungovernable. "All right, listen up," Sawyer said, his voice struggling for authority over the sound of claws clicking on the metal floor grating. "We are instituting a standard ration protocol. Fluid intake is mandatory. Sleep shifts are non-negotiable. And absolutely no one touches the atmospheric regulators. If you turn that dial past 20 degrees, the scrubbers overheat and we all suffocate. Is that clear?" 5 pairs of eyes stared back at him. 2 were round and human. 3 were slitted and golden. "He talks a lot," Nova whispered to Milo. "Like the announcements on the transit shuttle." "I heard that," Sawyer snapped. "And I am not an announcement. I am the landlord. Now sleeping arrangements. Sable Maris, you take the fold out in the back office. Kids, you're on the mats here in the main bay." "Where is Briar?" Maris asked suddenly. Her ears swiveled like radar dishes scanning the room. Sawyer looked at the head count. 1, 2, 3, 4. The smallest Felisar kit, a striped bundle of anxiety named Briar, was missing. "She was just here," Sable said, her body tensing instantly, the exhausted refugee vanishing beneath the posture of a predator. "Nobody panic," Sawyer said, though his own pulse jumped. "The blast doors are sealed. She cannot get out. She is in the perimeter." He began a systematic sweep. He checked under the exam table. He checked behind the hydration unit. He checked the ventilation intake, praying she hadn't found a screwdriver. Finally, he walked into the small sanitation unit. The door to the medicine cabinet, above the sink, was slightly ajar. A small, striped tail was hanging out of it, twitching rhythmically. Sawyer gently pulled the cabinet door open. Briar had curled herself into a tight ball on the middle shelf, wedged between a bottle of rubbing alcohol and a box of synthetic bandages. She was fast asleep, her small chest rising and falling with a soft, purring rattle. Sawyer stared at her. He looked at the 5 toothbrushes he had just laid out on the sink counter. 5 bright splashes of color against the gray steel. He had lived alone for 5 years. His bathroom had contained 1 toothbrush, 1 razor, and 1 bar of soap. Now it looked like a kindergarten exploded. He felt a sudden crushing weight in his chest. It was not anger. It was terror. The terror of having something fragile to lose again. "Is she okay?" Maris appeared in the doorway, her movements silent. "She is sleeping in the bandage supply," Sawyer whispered. "Leave her. It is probably the safest she has felt in weeks." Maris looked at him, her golden eyes softening. "You have good instincts, Sawyercade. For a human." "I have survival instincts," Sawyer corrected, stepping back so he did not wake the kit. "There is a difference." The front airlock cycled with a heavy hiss. The biometric chime announced a friendly arrival. "That will be Maisie," Sawyer said, checking his chrono. It was 0800 hours. "Prepare yourselves. She is intense." Maisie Cade stormed into the clinic like a weather event. She was wearing her school tunic, her backpack slung over one shoulder, and carrying a datapad that was scrolling rapid-fire news feeds. She stopped dead in the center of the living area, dropping her bag on the floor. She looked at the pile of children on the mats. She looked at Sable, who was standing guard by the window shutters. She looked at Sawyer. "You actually did it," Maisie said. Her face was unreadable. "I did not do anything," Sawyer said defensively. "They followed me home. It is a temporary tactical retreat." Maisie walked over to Nova, who was sitting on the floor dissecting a protein bar wrapper. Maisie knelt down, bringing herself to eye level with the girl. "Hi," Maisie said. "I am Maisie. I know my dad looks like he is made of old leather and bad decisions, but he is harmless." Nova narrowed her eyes. "He kicked the coffee machine." "It deserves it," Maisie said solemnly. "That machine is evil." She stood up and turned to Sawyer. Her expression was fierce, the kind of look that made Sawyer realize she was growing up faster than he could handle. "Dad," she said, I saw the bounty postings on the way here. Rusk has their faces on every holoscreen from the docks to the spire. He is calling them a biological containment hazard. He says they are carrying a plague. Standard psychological warfare, Sawyer said, crossing his arms. Dehumanize the target. Makes it easier for civilians to report them and for security to shoot them. If you kick them out, Maisie said, her voice steady and hard. I will kick you out. I am serious, Dad. I will change the door codes. I will sleep in the vents. I will not let you send them back out there. Sawyer looked at his daughter, looked at his... He saw the fire in her eyes, the same fire her mother used to have when she argued about refugees or wounded strays. He felt a mixture of annoyance and a strange, lightning relief. He did not have to be the bad guy. He did not have to make the hard choice because Maisie had already made it for him. Nobody is getting kicked out, Maisie, Sawyer grunted. Not today. Now go do your homework, or help Maris figure out how to operate the food synthesizer without blowing up the kitchen. Maisie beamed. On it. Later that evening, the clinic had settled into a hum of low-level activity. The children were asleep, or pretending to be in the main bay. Briar had finally been coaxed out of the medicine cabinet and was curled up on top of a heat vent. Sawyer sat at the small metal table in the kitchenette. Sable and Maris sat opposite him. The perfect match file sat in the center of the table, its blue light pulsing dimly, like a breathing organism. We need the truth, Sawyer said. He kept his voice low. No more vague talk about algorithms. Why did Rusk liquidate your facility? Why these kids? Sable took a sip of water. Her hands were steady, but her claws were extended, scratching grooves into the metal cup. It is called the Orphan Litter Act, Sable said, her voice dripping with venom. A new policy the Coalition is testing in the outer sectors. They claim that non-human orphans in state care are a drain on resources. They claim that Felisar biology makes the children predisposed to predatory aggression, if not raised in a traditional pack structure. Which is a lie, Maris interjected softly. Felisar are communal. We raise each other. So Rusk decided to fix the problem by removing the inventory, Sawyer said, the soldier's term tasting like ash in his mouth. He calls it identity confiscation, Sable said. They wipe the records. They take the children to labor camps in the deep belt mines. Small hands are good for fixing microthrusters. And if they die well, they never existed on paper. Sawyer felt a cold rage harden in his gut. He knew Rusk was a bureaucrat, but this was industrial-scale cruelty disguised as efficiency. We were caretakers, Maris said. We could not stop the guards, but we could access the server room during the chaos. We downloaded the only file Rusk kept encrypted with a level 10 clearance. We thought it was his ledger, his dirty money. And instead, Sawyer tapped the glowing block. You found a guide to a washed-up vet on Hearthlight Station. We did not know it was you, Sable said. We just saw the name. The file promised guardianship. It promised legal immunity. If we give this file to the High Court and if you accept the match, the children are automatically transferred to your custody under the interspecies heritage law. Rusk cannot touch them without starting a diplomatic incident. Sawyer laughed a short, bitter bark. So I am a legal loophole. That is what this is. I am a human shield made of paperwork. You are a chance, Maris said. We do not care who wrote the file, Sawyer. We do not care if it is a trap or a joke. If it keeps them out of the mines, we will take it. We would walk into fire for them. I bet you would, Sawyer muttered. He looked at the file. But I want to know who wrote it. Who knows me well enough to use my own DNA as a key who hates Rusk, enough to set this up. We would like to know too, Maris said, her ears flattening. So, we can claw their face for putting us through this. The intercom buzzed. Sawyer flinched, his hand going to the stun baton he had taped under the table. Delivery. A familiar voice cracked over the speaker. Pizza diapers and high explosive ordnance. The usual Tuesday special, Sawyer exhaled. Let him in. It is Damien. The door slid open, and Damien Holt stepped in. He was a lanky man with a face that seemed permanently stuck in a half-grin, dressed in the grease-stained jumpsuit of a station mechanic. He was carrying 2 large duffel bags and a crate of what looked like contraband fruit. He stopped looking at the room full of sleeping alien children, the 2 Felisar women at the table and Sawyer. Well, Damien whistled low. You know, when you said you were quitting the dating scene, I did not think the universe would take it as a challenge. It sent you the whole family bundle. Deluxe edition. Shut up, Damien. Sawyer stood up and took one of the bags. Did you bring what I asked for? Toothbrushes. Damien listed, ticking off fingers. 5 of them. Color-coded. Nutrient paste, the good stuff, not the gray sludge. Antibiotics, suitable for feline physiology. And a localized signal jammer to keep Rusk's drones from sniffing your Wi-Fi. You are a lifesaver, Maris said, standing up. Damien blinked at her, then offered a charming, crooked smile. I try, ma'am. Damien Holt, chief engineer of Holding It Together Incorporated. And you are Sawyer. Maris, she said. And this is Sable. Pleasure, Damien said. He looked at Sawyer. Buddy, you have serious heat on you. I passed 3 patrol drones just coming up the lift. They are scanning retinas. Rusk is not playing. He has tagged this whole group as a bioterror cell, if anyone spots them. We know, Sawyer said. He walked back to the table and sat down heavily. That is why we need to open this file. Really open it. The guardianship papers are just the surface layer. There is something else inside. Something Rusk is terrified of. Sawyer pulled the data block closer. He placed his hand on the interface. The blue light flared, recognizing his bioprint. The text scrolled, identity confirmed. Decrypting, layer 2. Rows of code cascaded down the holographic display. It was dense, complex, and aggressive. Sawyer frowned. I know this syntax. He leaned in his eyes, darting across the hex codes. This isn't standard coalition encryption. This is Midnight Echo. It is a ghost protocol we used in the Deep Range Wars. It uses a chaotic, shifting cipher based on... He stopped. His breath caught in his throat. Based on what? Sable asked, leaning over his shoulder. Based on star charts, Sawyer whispered. Specific dates and specific coordinates. He typed a command into the interface. Query, key origin. The file responded with a string of numbers. Sector 4, Moon 9, Day 214. Sawyer felt the blood drain from his face. The room seemed to tilt. Sawyer! Damien stepped forward, his smile gone. What is it? That date. Sawyer said, his voice sounding hollow, like it was coming from a great distance. That location. Sector 4, Moon 9. That was the raid. What raid? Maris asked gently. The raid where my unit was ambushed, Sawyer said. We were acting on bad intel. We dropped into a kill zone. Half my squad was wiped out in the first 10 minutes. He looked up at them, his eyes haunted. That was the day Elena's shuttle was shot down. She was the extraction pilot. She came in to get us out and they blew her out of the sky. No debris, nobody. Just gone. The silence in the kitchen was heavy, suffocating. The only sound was the hum of the refrigerator. This file, Sawyer pointed a trembling finger at the hologram. It is using the coordinates of her death as the encryption key. Someone was there. Someone saw it happen. And they recorded it. He stood up abruptly, pacing the small kitchen. The lethargy of the past 5 years, the gray fog of grief was burning away. In its place was something hotter, sharper. Rusk was the intelligence officer for that sector. Sawyer said, the realization hitting him like a physical blow. He provided the intel for that mission. If this file contains the flight logs, the comms data... It proves he set you up. Sable finished the thought. Her voice was low, dangerous. It proves he sacrificed your unit and your wife to cover something up. Sawyer slammed his fist into the wall. The metal dented. He killed her. He has been climbing the corporate ladder for 5 years on the bones of my wife. He turned back to the table, his eyes blazing. I am going to kill him. I am going to find him, and I am going to dismantle him piece by piece. Sawyer, Sable moved. She was fast. In a blink, she was between him and the door, her hand pressing flat against his chest. It was not a shove. It was a wall. Move, Sable, Sawyer growled. No, she said. Her golden eyes bored into him. You smell like ozone and adrenaline. You smell like blood before it is even spilled. He killed Elena, Sawyer shouted, though he tried to keep his voice down for the kids. And if you go out there now in a blind rage, he will kill you too, Sable said. And then he will come here and take the children. Is that what you want? Is that what she died for? Revenge is a powerful engine, Sawyer, Maris added from the table, her voice soft but firm. But it runs on dirty fuel. The children can smell it. Look. She pointed to the doorway of the kitchen. Standing there, clutching the frame, was Ash. He was the quietest of the 5, a human boy of about 10, who had not spoken a word since they arrived. He had messy dark hair, and eyes that looked like they had seen too much static. Ash was holding something in his hands. He walked slowly toward Sawyer, ignoring the tension in the room, ignoring the dent in the wall. He stopped in front of Sawyer and held out his hands. In his palms lay a small mechanical bird. It was a cheap toy, likely scavenged from a trash bin. One of its wings was snapped off, dangling by a single wire. The gears inside were jammed. Ash looked up at Sawyer. He did not speak. He just held up the broken thing. Fix it. Sawyer looked at the boy. He looked at the broken wing. The rage in his veins was still thumping hot and demanding, but the sight of the boy's expectant face acted like a coolant. Sawyer took a deep, shuddering breath. He looked at Sable, who slowly lowered her hand from his chest. He knelt down in front of Ash. His hands, which had been clenched into fists a moment ago, relaxed. He took the toy bird gently. It is the actuator, Sawyer whispered, his voice rough. The gear is stripped. He pulled a small multi-tool from his belt. Damien, hand me the micro-welder from the bag. Damien tossed it instantly. Sawyer worked. For 5 minutes, the only sound in the room was the tiny hiss of the welder and the soft click of tools. He realigned the gear. He fused the plastic wing back into place. He adjusted the tension spring. It was a small act, a meaningless act in the grand scheme of galactic politics. But for Sawyer, it was an anchor. It was a reminder that he was not just a soldier anymore. He was a medic, he was a father, he was a fixer. He wound the key on the back of the bird and set it on the floor. The bird whirred to life, flapping its wings and hopping clumsily across the metal grating. Ash smiled. It was a small, fleeting thing, but it was there. Sawyer stood up. The red haze was gone, replaced by a cold, hard clarity. You are right, Sawyer said to Sable. Revenge is sloppy. Justice is cleaner. He walked back to the table and looked at the file. We do not just kill Rusk. That is too easy. We destroy him. We use this file to expose every lie, every crime, every dirty deal he has ever made. We strip him of his rank, his power, and his freedom. We make sure he dies in a cell knowing he lost to a vet and a bunch of kids. Now you sound like a perfect match, Maris said, a small smile touching her lips. We need to crack the rest of this code, Sawyer said, tapping the block. Layer 2 is open, but the core data, the actual video logs, is behind a level 3 biolock. It needs a secondary key, something physical. Physical, Damien asked. Like a keycard. No, Sawyer shook his head. Midnight Echo protocols use personal totems. Objects that have emotional resonance with the encoder. If Elena created this, the key is something she had. Something she would have kept safe. Do you have anything of hers? Sable asked. I have a box of her things in storage, Sawyer said. But Rusk's men will be watching the storage units. We do not need to go to storage, Maisie called out from the doorway. She had been listening. We need to go to the archive. If Mom left a digital echo, the physical key might be virtual, a signature in the station's old memory core. The Starfall archive, Sawyer nodded. It is the oldest databank on the station. It is neutral ground, but it hates human interfaces. It is built on ancient Felisar tech. Good thing we have 2 Felisar and 5 Chaos agents, Maris said, smoothing her tunic. Sawyer looked at his new team. A mechanic, a teenage hacker, 2 alien warriors, and 5 refugee children. It was the worst tactical squad he had ever seen, and he wouldn't trade them for a battalion of Marines. Get some sleep, Sawyer ordered. Tomorrow we are not hiding anymore. We are going to the archive. We are going to crack this file. And then we are going to send Halden Rusk a wake-up call he will never forget. Can I bring the shotgun? Damien asked hopefully. Sawyer looked at the toy bird chirping on the floor. Bring the shotgun, but pack extra toothbrushes. I have a feeling we are going to be on the run for a while. The Starfall archive was not designed to be entered. It was designed to be admired from a distance, a monolithic slab of obsidian and silent glass floating in the zero-gravity center of the station's neutral zone. It housed the collective history of 6 sectors, a repository so vast and old that the station had essentially been built around it like a protective shell around a pearl. Sawyer Cade adjusted the strap of his medical bag, which now contained 3 stun grenades and a very illegal decryption module. He looked at the massive blast doors of the archive's public terminal entrance. It looks angry, Nova said, standing beside him. She was wearing a headset that was 2 sizes too big for her. It is just a door, Nova, Sawyer said. Doors do not have emotions. This one does, Maris corrected him. She was checking the charge on a small pulse pistol she had concealed in the folds of her sleeve. The Starfall archive is run by a localized AI built on Felisar logic architecture. It values silence, patience, and decorum. It detests military signatures and human impatience. Well, Sawyer cracked his neck, the sound loud in the quiet corridor. It is about to have a very bad day. The plan was simple, which meant, in Sawyer's experience, it had a 50% chance of working and a 100% chance of hurting. All right, team, Sawyer whispered. Sawyer. Deployment positions, Milo, you are the scholar. Look confused and eager. Nova, you are the bait. Ask questions that are so annoying the security drones have to process them. Pip. He looked at the toddler who was currently trying to eat a sticker he had found on the floor. Pip, you just exist. Be cute. If anyone points a weapon at you, cry loud enough to shatter glass. Can you do that? Pip burped. Good enough, Sawyer said. Sable, Maris, you are the chaperones. You look diplomatic. I am the tech support. You look like a janitor who stole a doctor's coat, Sable noted dryly. That is the look I am going for, Sawyer said. Invisible, now move out. They approached the entrance. The security checkpoint was manned by 2 drones and a bored-looking station official who was scrolling through a datapad. Milo stepped up first. He held up a datapad that Maisie had loaded with complex astronomical charts. Excuse me, Milo said, his voice trembling just the right amount. I am doing a thesis on the migration patterns of the star whales of Sector 8. I believe your database has an error in the parallax trajectory. The official looked up, blinking. Kid, the public viewing deck is on level 4. But the error is in the core, Milo insisted, pushing the datapad into the official's face. Look, the math does not resolve. While the official was distracted by the sudden academic aggression of a 10-year-old Nova slipped past the turnstile. She skipped toward the inner scanner, humming a tune. Halt! A security drone hovered in her path. Unauthorized biological entity. Present clearance. Why are you blue? Nova asked the drone. My brother says blue lights mean the system is sad. Are you sad? Do you want a hug? The drone's logic processor's word. It was programmed to detect threats, not existential empathy, from human children. Query invalid. State purpose. My purpose is to find the bathroom, Nova lied smoothly, and to ask why you don't have legs. While the drone stalled, trying to parse the non-sequiturs, Sawyer, Sable, and Maris moved to the service entrance on the far left. This door had no handle. It was a quantum state biolock. It required a specific harmonic resonance to open, usually a song sung by a Felisar elder, or a code transmitted by a high-ranking diplomat. Sawyer pulled out his decryption tool. It was a messy bundle of wires and processors he had jury-rigged from a toaster and a military radio. You are going to pick a quantum lock with a spatula, Sable asked, her eyebrows raising. I am not picking it, Sawyer grunted, attaching the wires to the doorframe. I am annoying it. He activated the device. It began to emit a low, dissonant frequency. It was not a code, it was digital noise, static, chaos. The door's interface flashed red. It tried to remodulate to block the noise. Sawyer adjusted the frequency, chasing the door's logic, jamming every attempt it made to stabilize. This is barbaric, Maris whispered. She was checking her reflection in the black glass of a security camera, smoothing the fur on her ears. Focus, Maris, Sawyer muttered, sweat beading on his forehead. I am focusing, Maris replied lightly. I am focusing on looking harmless. If the camera sees a woman fixing her hair, it registers vanity, not infiltration. It lowers the threat index. The door hissed. It was a sound of mechanical frustration. The lock clicked, then cycled open, unable to maintain its quantum state against the barrage of chaotic noise. Human persistence, Sawyer said, wiping his brow. We do not have to be smarter than the lock. We just have to be more stubborn. Sable looked at him, and for a second, the predator's edge in her eyes softened into something like respect. You have no fear, do you? You walk into fire because you think you can talk the flames into dying down. I have plenty of fear, Sawyer said, stepping into the dark, cool air of the archive. I am terrified. But the door's open, let's go. They slipped inside. The archive was a cathedral of data. Towering columns of blue light stretched up into the darkness, each one containing millions of petabytes of history. The air was cold and smelled of ozone and ancient dust. Maisie, Sawyer tapped his comms. We are in. Guide us to the source. Sector 9. Maisie's voice came back clear and tense. The signal from the perfect match file is pinging a server in the restricted basement levels. Dad, be careful. The network chatter is spiking. Rusk knows someone is in there. Understood, Sawyer said. They moved deeper into the stacks. The silence was heavy, broken only by the soft hum of the servers. Then, Sawyer's wrist unit chimed. A priority message, text only. Sender P. Halden Rusk, subject a proposal. Sawyer stopped. He looked at the small screen. Dr. Cade. I know you are inside. You are a resourceful man. I admire that. But you are fighting a gravity well. I have a counteroffer. Leave the file. Leave the Felisar specimens. Walk away with your daughter. I will wipe your debt. I will clear your record. You can go back to fixing horses. You can be a father who watches his child grow up instead of a martyr who leaves her an orphan. You have 5 minutes. Sawyer stared at the words. The offer hung in the air, heavy and seductive. To be safe. To go back to the quiet mornings in the clinic. To not look over his shoulder every time a door opened. He had lost Elena because he tried to be a hero. He tried to do the right thing, and the universe had punished him by taking the love of his life. If he walked away, now Maisie would live. She would grow up safe. Sawyer, Sable's voice broke his trance. He looked up. Sable and Maris were watching him. They saw the message on his screen. They did not move. They did not reach for their weapons. They just watched him with a terrifying silent acceptance. "It is a good offer," Maris said softly. Her tail was still wrapping around her leg. "He will keep his word. He is a man of law in his own twisted way. If you give him what he wants, he will let you go." Sawyer looked at the children. Milo and Nova were staring at the towering lights of the server stacks, their faces bathed in the blue glow. They looked small, breakable. "He called them specimens," Sawyer said. His voice was quiet. "What?" Sable asked. In the message, Sawyer tapped the screen. "He called you and the kids Felisar specimens, not people. Specimens." Sawyer deleted the message. "I do not make deals with people who think children are inventory," Sawyer said. He looked at Sable. "And I am not doing this to be a hero. I am doing it because if I walk away, I will never be able to look my daughter in the eye again. And I value her respect more than my safety." Sable let out a breath she seemed to have been holding since they met. She stepped closer to him. It was a breach of her usual tactical distance. She brushed her shoulder against his arm, a Felisard gesture of pack solidarity. "Then we walk into the fire together," she said. "Sector 9 is this way," Sawyer said, turning his back on the exit. They descended into the lower levels. The architecture changed here. The sleek obsidian gave way to older, rougher metal. This was the foundation of the station, the parts that were built before the treaties, before the peace. They found the terminal. It was a standalone unit, disconnected from the main grid, covered in a layer of dust. "This is it," Sawyer said. He pulled the perfect match file from his pocket. It was pulsing rapidly now, a frantic heartbeat of blue light. He placed the block onto the terminal's interface. The reaction was instant. The terminal woke up with a groan of powering fans. Holographic screens flared to life, surrounding them in a sphere of data. Encryption key accepted. DNA match confirmed. Authorization Lieutenant Elena Cade. Playing record Black Box Alpha. Sawyer's heart hammered against his ribs. He saw the name. Elena. A video window opened. It was shaky, grainy footage taken from a helmet cam. Sawyer recognized the landscape immediately. The red dust of Sector 4. The jagged rocks of Moon 9. The camera panned. It showed a dropship, his unit's dropship, smoking on the ground. But it wasn't crash damage. It was precision scuttling charges. "They didn't crash," Sawyer whispered. "They were grounded." The audio crackled. A voice cut through the static. "This is Rusk. Clean it up. No survivors. We cannot have witnesses to the shipment." The camera turned. It showed a staging area hidden in the canyons. Cages, hundreds of them. Inside were Felisar. Not soldiers, civilians, families. "It was a trafficking ring," Maris gasped, her hand flying to her mouth. "During the war, Rusk wasn't just killing soldiers. He was selling refugees." The camera moved again, frantic now. The person wearing the helmet was running. They were breathing hard. "Sawyer," Elena's voice. Sawyer grabbed the edge of the console. His knees buckled. It was her. It was really her. "Sawyer, if you find this, I am sorry. I thought I was flying an extraction. I didn't know. I found the manifest. Rusk is moving them to the outer rim. He is using the war as a cover. I am going to hide the data in the archive's echo drive. It is the only place safe from him." There was the sound of gunfire, close. "I love you," she said. "You are the best man I know. Find them, save them, be the match they need." The video cut to static. Sawyer stood frozen. The silence in the archive was absolute. He had spent 5 years thinking Elena had died because of a mistake, because of bad luck. But she hadn't. She had died because she had stumbled onto a monster, and she had tried to stop him. She had died a hero. Sawyer, Maris, was beside him. She did not say anything else. She just reached out and took his hand. Her palm was rough, her claws retracted. Sawyer looked at her. His vision was blurred with tears he refused to shed. "He killed her," Sawyer whispered. "He executed her." "And she made sure he would not get away with it," Sable said fiercely. "She left us the weapon." "We need to download this," Sawyer said, his voice thickening. "We need to get this to the High Council." "Sawyer," Maris said softly. She stepped closer, invading his personal space in the dark, cold light of the holograms. "I was afraid of you," she confessed, "when the file picked a human. I thought you would be weak or cruel. I thought trusting you was like opening my belly to a knife." She looked up at him, her golden eyes reflecting the data streams. "That is what love is for my people. It is the ultimate vulnerability. To show your softest parts and trust the other, not to claw them out." Sawyer looked at her. He saw the fear and the hope warring in her expression. He saw a mirror of his own damaged soul. "I used to think that too," Sawyer said, his voice rough. "I thought closing off was strength. I thought if I didn't care, I couldn't get hurt." He looked at the kids who were huddled together watching the screen. "I thought only humans were stupid enough to believe that." He managed a weak, dry smile. "We are all stupid," Mara said, a purr rumbling in her chest. "That is why we need a pack." She leaned her forehead against his shoulder. It was a brief, intimate contact, a grounding wire for the electricity of his grief. From the shadows, Sable watched them. She looked at Maisie, who had fallen asleep against a server rack, exhausted by the adrenaline. Sable whispered in the old tongue, then translated for herself. "She makes him come alive." She looked at Sawyer. He was no longer the hollow shell they had met in the bar. He was cracked, yes, but the light was shining through the cracks. "Alert!" Milo shouted, pointing at the console. "Red lights. Lots of red lights." The archive's silent atmosphere shattered. Sirens began to wail a high, piercing shriek that hurt the teeth. "Perimeter breach!" Sawyer yelled, snapping back to soldier mode. "Sector 9 access door!" "They are here!" Sable hissed, drawing her weapon. "Rusk's cleanup crew!" "Download the file," Sawyer ordered. "I need 30 seconds." The heavy blast doors at the far end of the hall exploded inward. Smoke and debris filled the air. Through the haze, armored figures advanced. They were not using stunners. They were using plasma rifles, lethal force. "Target acquired," a mechanical voice boomed. "Eliminate all witnesses." "Nova Milo, get behind the server bank," Sawyer roared. He typed frantically, the data transfer bar crawling toward 100%, 90%. A plasma bolt scorched the air inches from Sawyer's head, melting the metal of the console. "Sawyer, we have to move!" Sable shouted, firing back. Her shots were precise, forcing the attackers to cover, but there were too many of them. 95%. "They are flanking us," Maris yelled. "They are going for the kids!" Sawyer looked up. Two of the armored soldiers had bypassed the main firefight. They were moving toward the server rack where Nova and Milo were hiding. Sawyer looked at the progress bar. 98%, 2 seconds. He looked at the kids. The soldiers raised their rifles. There was no choice. There was never really a choice. Sawyer ripped the data block from the console. Error transfer interrupted. File corrupted. He didn't care. He grabbed his medical bag and hurled a stun grenade over the server rack. "Down!" he screamed. The grenade detonated with a blinding flash and a concussive thump. The two soldiers crumpled, their sensors overloaded. Sawyer sprinted across the open ground, sliding on his knees to get between the kids and the main force. He raised his own weapon, a heavy modified scattergun he had kept from the war, and opened fire. "Go, go, go!" he bellowed. Sable and Maris grabbed the children. They moved as a unit, a desperate, chaotic organism of fur and fear and human determination. They ran toward the emergency maintenance hatch Sawyer had scouted earlier. Plasma fire chewed up the floor behind them. They dove through the hatch just as a rocket impacted the terminal they had been using. The explosion shook the foundations of the archive. Sawyer slammed the hatch shut and spun the locking wheel. He welded it shut with a portable laser torch, the metal glowing angry orange. He slumped against the wall, gasping for air. The data block in his hand was dark. The light was gone. "The file," Sable said, looking at the dead block. "Did we get it?" Sawyer looked at it. "We got fragments, but the core, the full confession, is still in the archive." "We lost it," Maris said, her voice trembling. "No," Sawyer said. He looked at Nova and Milo, who were shaking but alive. He looked at Maisie, who was clutching his arm. "We lost the easy way out. We didn't lose the war." "You chose them," Sable said. She was looking at him with a strange expression. "You could have finished the download. You could have destroyed Rusk right there. But you moved to save the Cubs." "The file is just data," Sawyer said, holstering his weapon. "They are the future. You don't trade the future for the past." "Rusk knows we failed to get the full file," Maris said. "But he also knows we saw the video. He knows that we know." "Which means," Sawyer said, pushing himself off the wall, his face grim, "he can't play the legal game anymore. He can't offer me deals. The mask is off." "He will hunt us openly now," Sable said. "No more bounties, no more biological hazard lies. Just hit squads." "Good," Sawyer said. He checked the load in his scattergun. "I hate politics. I prefer a target I can see." He looked at his ragtag family. They were dirty, terrified, and cornered. "We are burned," Sawyer said. "We are public enemies, but we are breathing. And as long as we are breathing, Rusk has a problem." "Where do we go?" Maisie asked. Sawyer looked down the dark maintenance tunnel. "We go to the one place Rusk won't look, the one place on this station where the lights don't shine." "The Undercity," Damien's voice crackled over the comms, static-filled but audible. "Sawyer, you are crazy. The Undercity is full of smugglers and pirate lords." "Exactly," Sawyer said. "My kind of people. Let's move." As they walked into the darkness, Sawyer felt a weight settle on his shoulders. It wasn't the weight of grief anymore. It was the weight of responsibility. He hadn't just found a file. He had found a reason to fight. And for the first time in 5 years, the ghost of Elena wasn't haunting him. She was walking beside him, nodding in approval. "You are the match," she had said. "Damn right I am," Sawyer whispered to the dark. "And I am about to burn the whole house down." The Undercity of Hearthlight Station did not have weather. It had condensation. It dripped from the rusted pipes overhead, a constant rhythmic tapping that sounded like a ticking clock. Sawyer Cade sat on a crate of recycled protein packs, cleaning his scattergun. The weapon was an antique, heavy, and scarred, much like the man holding it. His hands moved with muscle memory, but his eyes were unfocused, staring at a patch of darkness, where the light of the glow lamp failed to reach. "You are vibrating," Sable said. She was perched on a high beam above him, her black tail hanging down like a pendulum. "Your heart rate is 110. You smell like copper and burnt wire." "I am fine," Sawyer lied. "You are lying," Maris added from the floor, where she was braiding Briar's hair to keep the child calm. "Felisar can hear a heartbeat shift from 10 meters away. You are in distress." Sawyer snapped the barrel of the gun back into place. "We are being hunted by a paramilitary death squad authorized by a high-ranking praetor. If I were calm, I would be insane." But it was not just the hunt. It was the noise. The station's ventilation fans in this sector thrummed at a low frequency, a deep, resonant thump, thump, thump. To most, it was background noise. To Sawyer, it sounded exactly like the orbital bombardment cannons on the ridge of Sector 4. Every thump took him back. The red dust. The scream of incoming fire. The static on the comms line when he called for Elena and got only silence. "Sawyer," Damien's voice cut through the comms earbud. It was static heavy. "I have bad news. The surveillance loop I set up on the perimeter just went dead. Not a glitch. Someone cut the hard line." Sawyer stood up instantly. "Position. Sector 7 Junction," Damien said. "Near the water reclamation tanks. I am heading there to splice it back, but—" "Damien, pull back," Sawyer ordered. "It is a trap." "I can fix it in 2 minutes," Damien argued. "If we lose eyes on that corridor, they can flank us." "Do not go there," Sawyer barked. Then a new sound echoed through the tunnels. It was not a fan. It was a scream. High, terrified, and abruptly cut short. Sawyer's blood turned to ice. He knew that voice. "Maisie," he whispered. He didn't wait for the team. He sprinted. He ran past Maris, past the confused faces of the children, plunging into the labyrinth of pipes and steam. He reached the junction in 90 seconds. It was empty. There was no struggle, no blood. Just a single child's shoe, Nova's sneaker battered and covered in grease, lying in the center of the walkway. And next to it, Maisie's datapad, smashed into pieces. Sawyer stopped. The world narrowed down to a tunnel vision of gray steel and red rage. His breath came in short, jagged gasps. Thump, thump, thump. The fans beat against his skull. A holographic projection flickered to life from a small emitter disc left on the floor. It was Halden Rusk. He looked impeccable, his uniform pressed sitting comfortably in a chair that looked far too clean for the station. "Dr. Cade," Rusk said. His voice was calm, reasonable, the voice of a man discussing a tax audit. "I imagine you are feeling quite emotional right now. That is the problem with your kind. You attach yourself to things that are easily broken." Sawyer stared at the hologram, his knuckles white on the grip of his gun. "I have the girl," Rusk continued, "and one of the Felisar runts. Nova. I believe the file calls her. Interesting genetic marker on that one." "If you touch them," Sawyer grated out his voice, sounding like grinding stones, "I will tear this station apart." "Standard threats," Rusk dismissed him with a wave of his hand. "Here is the reality. I am at the Plaza of Stars, the old exhibition hall. I will wait there for 1 hour. You bring the file. You bring the remaining specimens. I release the human child." "And Nova?" Sawyer asked. "Nova is evidence," Rusk said. "She stays." The hologram flickered and died. Sawyer stood there shaking. The vibration Sable had talked about was now a full-blown tremor. The past was bleeding into the present. He was back in the canyon. He was losing everyone. He was helpless. He fell to his knees, the gun clattering to the floor. He couldn't breathe. The air felt thin, full of dust that wasn't there. "Sawyer," hands grabbed him. Strong clawed hands. Sable pulled him up, shaking him hard. "Breathe," she hissed in his face. "Smell the air, grease, water, ozone. You are here. You are not there." Sawyer gasped, sucking in a lungful of the foul undercity air. He looked at Sable. Her golden eyes were wide fierce. "He has them," Sawyer choked out. "He has Maisie." "We know," Maris said, stepping up beside him. She looked pale, her ears flattened tight against her skull. "He wants a trade." "I will go," Sable said immediately. She looked at Sawyer, her expression resolving into a terrifying calm. "I am the primary caretaker listed in the file. If I surrender, he might let the others go. He wants the adult Felisar to pin the crimes on. He wants a scapegoat." "No," Maris snapped. "You know Rusk, he does not make deals. He clears boards. If you surrender, he kills you, keeps the kids and kills Sawyer. A surrender is a collar for life." "Then what do we do?" Sable snarled, turning on her. "We cannot fight a fortified position. He has a squad of shock troopers." "We do not trade lives," Sawyer said. He stood up straight. The tremors were still there in his hands, but his voice was steady. It was the voice of the man who had survived the canyon. The man who had walked out when everyone else stayed down. "We are not trading anyone," Sawyer said. "We are going to take them back." "How?" Sable asked. "The plaza is an open kill box. He will see us coming a mile away." Sawyer checked his chrono. In 20 minutes, the station celebrates the Festival of Lights. For 60 seconds, every main power grid on the station cycles down for the moment of silence. It is ceremonial. The lights go out, the sensors reset. 60 seconds of darkness, Maris whispered. Her tail twitched. "Phylisar see in the dark," Sawyer said. "Rusk's men rely on thermal optics and HUD displays. When the power cycles their systems, we'll have a 5-second reboot lag. And in the dark, without tech, they are just men." "And us?" Sable asked. "We are just 2 women and a vet with a shaky hand." "We are a pack," Sawyer said. "And they took our cubs." The plan was desperate. It relied on timing so precise that a single second of error would mean death. They moved toward the upper levels. Damien was supposed to meet them at the service elevator to override the lockdown on the plaza doors. But when they reached the rendezvous point, the elevator was a twisted wreck. Smoke billowed from the control panel. Leaning against the wall, clutching his side, was Damien. His mechanic's jumpsuit was dark with blood. "Damien!" Sawyer slid to his knees beside his friend. "Hey!" Damien wheezed. He tried to smile, but it came out as a grimace. "I fixed the surveillance loop. Then I caught a little shrapnel. One of Rusk's drones. Nasty little thing." Sawyer pressed his hands over the wound. It was bad. Deep. "I need a medkit," Sawyer shouted. "No time." Damien grabbed Sawyer's wrist. His grip was weak. "The cycle starts in 4 minutes. I jammed the door open. You have to go." "I am not leaving you," Sawyer said. "If you don't go, Maisie dies," Damien said. He coughed, a wet, rattling sound. "Besides, if you die, I am absolutely not babysitting 5 kids. I charge double for weekends." Sawyer stared at him. The joke hung in the air, a fragile lifeline over the abyss of panic. "You stay awake," Sawyer ordered, his voice thick. "You hear me? You stay awake until I get back." "Go get him, Dad," Damien whispered, closing his eyes. Sawyer stood up. The grief he felt for Elena, the fear he felt for Maisie, the rage he felt for Damien, it all coalesced into a cold, hard singularity in his chest. He looked at Sable and Maris. They had seen Damien fall. They knew the cost was already paid. Now, they had to collect the purchase. "Let's go," Sawyer said. The Plaza of Stars was a vast domed atrium, designed to show off the nebula outside. Now it was a fortress. Rusk had set up a perimeter of portable barriers. Guards with heavy pulse rifles stood at every angle. In the center, under the grand glass dome, Maisie and Nova were kneeling on the floor, their hands bound. Rusk stood over them, checking his watch. Sawyer, Sable, and Maris crouched in the maintenance gantry, high above the floor. 3 minutes to the blackout, Sawyer whispered. Below, Rusk began to speak. His voice was amplified, echoing through the empty hall. "Time is almost up, Dr. Cade. I know you are watching. You are a predictable man. You linger. You hesitate." Rusk walked around Maisie. He trailed a hand over her hair. Maisie flinched away, glaring at him with pure hatred. "You remind me of him," Rusk said to Maisie. "Stubborn, emotional. Your father thinks he is a soldier, but he is just a medic. He fixes things. He cannot bear to break them. That is why he lost the war, and that is why he will lose you." Sawyer raised his scattergun. The range was long, too long for a shotgun. He needed to get closer. 2 minutes, Maris whispered. "I can drop on the left flank," Sable signaled. "Take out the heavy gunner. Wait for the dark," Sawyer ordered. "You always need someone to save," Rusk called out, looking up at the shadows. "First your wife, now these strays. Tell me, Sawyer, when Elena died, did you try to fix her too? Or was there not enough left to stitch back together? The taunt hit Sawyer like a physical blow. The red haze returned. He roared a sound of pure animal fury and leveled the gun. He was going to jump. He was going to kill Rusk, even if he died in the air. No! Sable grabbed his belt. But Rusk had heard him. There you are, he signaled the guards. Open fire on the gantry. Plasma bolts sizzled through the air, chewing up the metal walkway. Sawyer and the Felisar scrambled back. Dad! Maisie screamed from the floor. Dad, don't! Sawyer peered over the edge. Rusk had drawn a pistol and was pointing it at Maisie's head. Come down, Sawyer, Rusk shouted. Or I paint the floor with her. Sawyer stood up. He held his hands out. I am coming down, he yelled. Sawyer, no, Maris hissed. Stay here, Sawyer ordered them. Wait for the dark. Sawyer climbed over the rail and dropped to the floor. He landed hard, his knees protesting, but he stood up. He walked toward Rusk, his hands empty. Here I am, Sawyer said. Let them go. Rusk smiled. It was a cold, thin expression. The file first. It is destroyed, Sawyer said. The archive imploded. You know that. Then you are useless to me, Rusk said. He cocked the pistol. But killing you will be a pleasure. You are a loose end, Sawyer, a remnant of a war I already won. Sawyer looked at Rusk. He looked at the gun. He looked at Maisie. Maisie was crying, but she was looking him straight in the eye. Dad, she said, her voice trembling but clear. Don't be him. Don't become the thing that killed Mom. Sawyer froze. The thing that killed Mom. Not just a bomb, not just a man, but the cruelty, the indifference, the willingness to trade lives for power. If Sawyer killed Rusk out of hate, he lost. If he died to save them, he won. I am not him, Sawyer said softly. He looked at the station clock on the wall. 19:59:58. 19:59:59. Goodbye, Doctor, Rusk said. 20:00. The station died. The hum of the ventilation cut out. The lights in the dome vanished. The plaza was plunged into absolute suffocating darkness. Hold fire! Rusk shouted, his voice cracking. Switch to thermal! Sawyer dropped flat to the floor. 1 second. Above him, 2 shadows detached from the gantry. They did not fall. They glided. 2 seconds. There was a sound of wet tearing. A guard screamed on the left, then another on the right. Sable and Maris were moving. In the dark, they were not refugees. They were apex predators. 3 seconds. Where are they? Rusk yelled. Shoot everything! Guards fired blindly. Flashes of plasma illuminating the dark in strobe light bursts. Sawyer rolled. He didn't run away. He rolled toward the girls. He felt Nova's sneaker. He grabbed it. Get down! He covered their bodies with his own as a plasma bolt scorched the floor inches away. 4 seconds. Sawyer, Sable's voice came from the dark, a directionless growl. Left flank clear. Sawyer grabbed his scattergun from where he had dropped it. He didn't need to see. He knew the layout. He knew where the threats were. He fired. The heavy boom of the scattergun was deafening in the silence. A guard cried out and fell. Sawyer stood up, dragging the girls with him. He was not fighting like a soldier now. He was moving by instinct, by the sound of breathing, by the smell of fear. He felt Maris brush past him, a soft rush of air. She took out the guard on his right. Sable took the one in front. They were a triad, left, right, center, a perfect, deadly rhythm. Rusk, Sawyer shouted into the dark. A muzzle flash answered him. A bullet old-school projectile slammed into Sawyer's shoulder. He grunted, spinning around, but he didn't fall. He saw the flash. He charged. Rusk was fumbling with his thermal goggles, trying to reboot them. He didn't see the man coming out of the dark until Sawyer slammed into him. They hit the floor. Rusk's gun skittered away. Sawyer had his hands on Rusk's collar. He pulled him up and slammed him back down. You want to talk about the past? Sawyer roared. He raised his fist. He could end it. One strike to the trachea, one squeeze. Rusk stared up at him, eyes wide in the gloom. "Do it," Rusk hissed. "Prove me right." Sawyer's fist hovered. He could feel the pulse in Rusk's neck. He could feel the ghost of Elena watching him. "Don't become the thing that killed Mom." Sawyer exhaled. He opened his hand and shoved Rusk's head back against the floor hard enough to stun, but not to kill. "No," Sawyer said. "You don't get the easy way out." The lights flickered. The 60 seconds were up. The emergency flood slammed back on blindingly bright. Rusk lay dazed on the floor. His guards were incapacitated, unconscious or groaning, stripped of their weapons by the Felisar. Sawyer stood up, clutching his bleeding shoulder. "Get the kids," Sawyer told Sable. "We leave." "We are not killing him," Sable asked, her chest-heaving claws dripping with hydraulic fluid from a guard's armor. "He is a witness," Sawyer said. "We need him alive to see his own fall." They ran. They grabbed the kids and sprinted for the service exit before reinforcements could arrive. As they reached the exit, Sawyer's belt unit beeped. A notification, location alert, Cade Veterinary Clinic. Status structural failure, fire detected. Sawyer stopped. He looked at the notification. His clinic, his home, the place where he had hidden from the world for 5 years. Rusk had sent a second team to burn it down. "Dad," Maisie pulled at his good arm. "What is it?" Sawyer looked at the screen, then he deleted the notification. "Nothing," Sawyer said. "Just a building." He looked at Maisie, at Nova, clinging to Maris, at Sable, watching his back. "Let it burn," Sawyer said. "I have everything I need right here." They moved into the shadows of the loading docks. They were homeless. They were wounded. But they were alive. "Wait," Sawyer said suddenly. He stopped near a pile of discarded cargo crates. He reached into his pocket. During the fight, when he had tackled Rusk, his hand had brushed against something in Rusk's jacket. Instinct, old thief instincts from his youth, had made him grab it. He pulled it out. It was a watch. An analog mechanical watch with a cracked face. Sawyer's breath caught. He turned it over. On the back, engraved in the steel Tuiske, "Time heals nothing but it passes anyway. La vie." It was his watch. He had given it to Elena for luck before she flew that mission. Rusk had kept it. A trophy from the pilot he had murdered. Sawyer's hand trembled. He held the watch up to the perfect match file which Maris was carrying. The watch clicked against the magnetic lock of the data block. The file didn't just pulse this time. It hummed. A deep, resonant sound that vibrated through Sawyer's bones. "Physical key accepted. Final decryption in progress. Estimated. Time 1 hour." "We have it," Sawyer whispered. "We have the whole thing." "Rusk will know you took it," Sable said, looking back toward the plaza. "He will not stop now. He cannot stop." "Good," Sawyer said. He strapped the watch onto his wrist, over the blood and the grime. It ticked against his pulse. "Because I am done running." He looked at his team. "We need a broadcast tower," Sawyer said. "We are going to play a movie for the whole sector, and Rusk is the star." From the distance, the sound of heavy boots echoed. Rusk was coming. And this time he was bringing everything he had. "Move," Sawyer commanded. They disappeared into the dark, leaving only the echo of ticking time behind them. The stellar jump gate of Hearthlight Freeport was not a circle. It was a scar in the fabric of the void. Located at the furthest edge of the station's structural spine, it was a place where the laws of physics grew thin and temperamental. Here, the starlight did not just shine. It smeared, stretching into long, iridescent ribbons that looked like oil on water. Sawyer Cade stood on the observation gantry of Terminal Omega. The air here vibrated with the hum of the graviton stabilizers, a sound that felt less like a machine and more like a headache trying to communicate. "This is a terrible place for a meeting," Maris shouted over the drone of the gate. She was checking the energy signature on her pulse pistol, her ears pinned flat against the gale of recycled air. "It is the only place," Sawyer replied. He adjusted the bandage on his shoulder where Rusk's bullet had grazed him. "The interference from the gate creates a blind spot for the station sensors, but it also creates a phenomenon called lattice resonance. It amplifies shortwave data signals by 3,000%. So if we broadcast the file here," Sable finished the thought, standing guard by the blast door, "it does not just go to the local authorities. It goes everywhere. It goes to every ship, every station, and every comms buoy in the sector," Sawyer said. "We are not just turning Rusk in. We are putting him on the galactic stage." "He is coming," Damien's voice crackled through the comms. He was back at the safe house, wired into the grid despite his injuries. "I have 3 transport skiffs approaching your vector. They are running dark, but I can see their exhaust trails." He brought the heavy guard Sawyer. "Good," Sawyer said. He looked at the control console in the center of the platform. It was an exposed mess of wires and crystals. "Milo, are you ready?" The 10-year-old Felisar boy popped his head up from under the console. He was wearing Sawyer's welding goggles, which were comically large on him. "I have bypassed the safety interlocks. But the signal is unstable. I need a hard connection." "You will get it," Sawyer said. He looked at Nova, who was holding Pip's hand near the emergency shelter of the booth. "Maisie, keep them down. If the shooting starts, you stay flat." "I know the drill, Dad," Maisie said. She looked pale, but her eyes were dry. She was holding a small, improvised jammer she had built herself. "Just make sure you don't get shot again. It ruins my shirt." The blast doors at the end of the gantry hissed open. They did not burst in. They walked. It was a slow, deliberate procession of power. Praetor Halden Rusk led the way, flanked by 6 armored troopers. The distortions from the jump gate made their silhouettes waver, like ghosts stepping out of a heat haze. Rusk looked at the swirling vortex of the gate behind Sawyer, then at the ragtag group standing defiantly on the platform. "Poetic," Rusk said, his voice amplified by his suit's speakers. "You chose the edge of the abyss to make your stand. It saves me the trouble of disposing of the bodies." "I am done running Halden," Sawyer said. He stepped forward, placing himself between the children and the soldiers. "And I am done playing by your rules." "You have no leverage," Rusk sneered. He gestured to the open space. "No archives to hide in. No shadows to ambush from. Just you, me, and the vacuum." "I have the truth," Sawyer said. He raised his left hand. Strapped to his wrist was the watch Elena's watch. Rusk's eyes narrowed. "A sentimental trinket. I should have crushed it when I took it off her corpse." "You kept it as a trophy," Sawyer said, his voice deadly quiet. "But you never looked at the mechanism. You did not know that Elena was an engineer before she was a pilot." Sawyer slammed his wrist down onto the data interface of the console. The watch cracked against the crystal surface. Click. The sound was small, but in the resonant chamber of the gate, it triggered a cascade. The perfect match file which Maris had slotted into the drive synced with the analog key in the watch. The lattice resonance took hold. The air around them exploded with light. It was not an explosion of fire, but of data. Holograms materialized not just on the small screen, but filling the entire gantry. The distortion of the gate acted as a lens magnifying the images until they were 10 meters tall. It was a panoramic nightmare. The air filled with the sounds of screaming. The holographic images showed the red dust of Sector 4. It showed the cages. It showed Rusk younger standing over a pile of Felisar bodies, signing a digital manifest. "Shipment confirmed," the giant, holographic Rusk boomed, his voice echoing off the station hull. "Classification biological waste. Payment transfer authorized." The real Rusk stumbled back, his face bathed in the blue light of his own crimes. The soldiers behind him faltered, looking up at the giant projection of their commander, committing an atrocity that violated 3 separate interspecies treaties. "Turn it off!" Rusk screamed. He pulled his weapon. "Destroy the console!" "Hold the line!" Sawyer shouted. Sable and Maris moved. They did not attack. They defended. They deployed portable energy shields stolen from Rusk's own armory, creating a barrier around the console. Plasma bolts hammered against the shields, sizzling and popping. "Milo, broadcast it!" Sawyer yelled over the roar of fire. "I am trying!" Milo shouted, his fingers flying across the keypad. "The encryption is fighting back. Rusk has a kill switch in the local grid. Bypass it." "I can't," Milo cried. "I need a chaotic variable, something the system can't predict." Sawyer looked at Pip. The toddler was sitting under the console, holding a juice box and looking bored. Next to him was a large red lever marked "Do Not Touch," gravitational flush. "Pip," Sawyer pointed. "Push the red button." "No," Maisie yelled. "That flushes the coolant system. It will freeze the tower." "It creates a thermal spike," Sawyer corrected. "It creates a signal flare." Pip, delighted to be included, slammed his small fist onto the button. A geyser of liquid nitrogen vented from the pipes above them. The temperature plummeted instantly. The sudden thermal shock confused the targeting sensors of the soldiers' rifles. But more importantly, it spiked the energy reading of the console. The broadcast signal jumped from local to interstellar. "We are live!" Milo cheered. "We are on every screen in the sector." Rusk saw the notification on his wrist comp. He saw the live feed warning blinking in angry red. His composure shattered. The cold, calculating bureaucrat vanished, replaced by a cornered animal. "Kill them!" Rusk shrieked. "Kill them all! If the carrier dies, the signal stops." He raised a heavy disruption cannon, a weapon designed to tear through tank armor, and aimed it not at Sawyer, but at the console itself. Sawyer saw the barrel glow. He knew the shields wouldn't hold. He didn't think. He didn't calculate. He moved. Sawyer threw himself across the console, covering the data core with his body, just as Rusk pulled the trigger. The beam hit. It was like being kicked by a horse made of lightning. The impact threw Sawyer against the metal railing. His armor absorbed the worst of it, but the heat seared through, burning his side. The smell of ozone and singed flesh filled the air. But the console was intact. The signal held. Sawyer lay on the deck, gasping for air, his vision graying out. "Sawyer!" Sable screamed. She broke cover. With a roar that sounded more like a lion than a humanoid, she leaped over the barrier. She moved so fast she was a blur of black fur and steel. She hit the soldiers on the left flank, her claws tearing through their armor joints. Maris took the right, her movements fluid and precise, disarming 2 guards before they could realign their aim. But Rusk was still standing. He dropped the heavy cannon and drew a combat knife, advancing on Sawyer. "You stubborn primitive ape," Rusk hissed, standing over Sawyer. "Do you think this changes anything? I am the law. I am the system." Sawyer tried to get up. His legs felt like lead. Rusk raised the knife. Then a small, hard object hit Rusk in the forehead. Thwack. Rusk blinked, stunned. He looked down. It was a half-eaten protein bar. He looked up. Maisie was standing on top of the booth, shaking with fear, but holding another protein bar, ready to throw. "Get away from my dad," she screamed. The distraction was all Sawyer needed. He swept his leg out, catching Rusk behind the knee. Rusk buckled. Sawyer scrambled up, ignoring the screaming pain in his side, and drove his shoulder into Rusk's midsection. They crashed into the railing. The void swirled below them, a dizzying drop into the jump gates event horizon. Sawyer had Rusk pinned against the rail. He had one hand on Rusk's throat, the other gripping Rusk's knife hand. "Do it," Rusk choked out, his eyes bulging. "Throw me over, murder a praetor. Show them you are just a killer like me." Sawyer looked at Rusk's face. He saw the fear, but he also saw the manipulation. Rusk wanted to die a martyr. He wanted to drag Sawyer down to his level. Sawyer tightened his grip. The rage was there, boiling in his blood. This was the man who killed Elena. This was the man who hunted children. It would be so easy, just one shove. "Sawyer!" Marissa's voice cut through the red haze. "Look at them," she said. Sawyer froze. He looked back. The fighting had stopped. The soldiers, realizing their commander was exposed, and their crimes were being broadcast live, had lowered their weapons. But it was the children Sawyer saw. Nova, Milo Ash, Briar, and Pip. And Maisie. They were all watching him. They were not looking at a soldier. They were not looking at a hero. They were looking at their father. "The family does not need a monster," Sable said softly, stepping up beside him. She put a hand on his shoulder. "We need you." Sawyer looked back at Rusk. The praetor was grinning, waiting for the kill. Sawyer exhaled. He released Rusk's throat. He grabbed Rusk's wrist and twisted, hearing the bone snap. Rusk screamed and dropped the knife. "I am not going to kill you, Halden." Sawyer said, his voice raspy but clear. "That is too quick." He shoved Rusk backward, not over the rail, but onto the deck plates. "You are going to live," Sawyer said, looming over him. "You are going to sit in a cell for the rest of your life. And every day you are going to remember that you were beaten by a vet, 2 cats, and a toddler." "You are nothing," Rusk spat, clutching his broken wrist. "You are just a variable, a statistical anomaly. You are just a point in the algorithm." "Attention." A booming voice amplified over the station's PA system. "This is station security. Stand down. I repeat, stand down." Heavy blast doors at the far end of the gantry opened. A squad of peacekeepers in blue armor flooded in. They weren't Rusk's men. They were neutral enforcement. They didn't aim at Sawyer. They aimed at Rusk. "Praetor Rusk," the lead officer announced. "You are under arrest for crimes against sentient life, illegal trafficking, and violation of the Sanctuary Act. The evidence has been verified by the High Council." Rusk was dragged to his feet. He looked small, now stripped of his authority. As they hauled him away, he looked back at Sawyer with eyes full of madness. "The file!" Rusk screamed. "It isn't real, it is a ghost. You are chasing a ghost, Cade." Sawyer watched him go. The adrenaline finally drained out of him, leaving his knees weak. He slumped against the railing. "Dad," Maisie ran to him, burying her face in his chest. The other kids followed, forming a pile of limbs and fur around him. "I am okay," Sawyer wheezed, patting heads and backs. "I am okay." Sable and Maris stood a little apart, watching. "The file," Maris said, pointing to the console. "It is changing." Sawyer looked up. The giant holograms of the war crimes were fading. In their place, the lattice resonance was coalescing into a single stable image. It was a woman. She was wearing a flight suit, her hair tied back in a messy bun. She looked tired, but her eyes were bright. "Elena," Sawyer whispered. It was not a recording. It was an interactive construct, an echo. A fragment of consciousness mapped onto a neural network saved in the final moments before death. The holographic Elena looked around the gantry. Her eyes settled on the children, then on Sable and Maurice. Finally, she looked at Sawyer. "Hello, soldier," she said. Her voice was the sound of home. "Is this?" Sawyer choked up. "Is this real?" "I am an echo," the image said gently. "A memory given form. I knew Rusk would try to erase everything, so I wrote myself into the code. I became the navigation system." The perfect match, Sawyer realized. It wasn't a dating profile. "No," Elena smiled. "It was a search parameter. I told the system to find the one person in the universe who possessed the exact combination of stubbornness, honor, and stupidity required to save these children. I told it to find the man who would never give up on a stray." She looked at the kids. "I didn't choose you because we were a perfect couple, Sawyer. I chose you because you are a good father. Even before you had children, you were a father to every broken thing you found." Sawyer felt the tears running down his face. He didn't wipe them away. The hard shell he had built around his heart for 5 years finally shattered. "I miss you," he whispered. "I know," Elena said. "But you don't need to mourn me anymore. I am just data now. My mission is done. The package is delivered." She looked at Sable and Maris. "Thank you," the Echo said, "for bringing them to him. And for staying. He needs someone to remind him to eat. And to stop him from jumping off gantries." Sable bowed her head, a gesture of deep respect. "We will guard him, Sky Sister." Sawyer, Elena's image began to fade as the lattice resonance destabilized. "Live. Don't just survive. Live. That is my final order." Elena, Sawyer reached out. But the light dissolved into star stuff, drifting away into the vortex of the jump gate. The console went dark. The silence that followed was not empty. It was full. Sawyer stood there for a long time. He felt a small hand slip into his. It was Nova. On his other side, Maris leaned her head against his arm. "She was beautiful," Maris said softly. "She was," Sawyer said. He took a deep breath. His side hurt, his shoulder throbbed. He was exhausted, but he felt light. "Let's go home," Sawyer said. Epilogue, 3 weeks later. The new apartment was technically larger than the clinic, but it felt smaller. This was mostly because it contained 7 people, a lot of new furniture that had been assembled incorrectly, and a very confused automated vacuum cleaner that Breyer kept trying to hunt. Sawyer stood in the kitchen staring at the chaos. There were shoes everywhere. Human sneakers mixed with Felisar climbing boots. There were toys on the ceiling, thanks to the anti-gravity emitter Damien had fixed for Ash. "I need more cabinets," Sawyer muttered, looking at the pile of dishes. "And a bigger coffee pot and maybe a soundproof wall." "You need to stop complaining," Sable said, walking past him. She was wearing one of his old flannel shirts over her tunic. It looked ridiculous and perfect. She placed a mug of coffee in his hand. "Here, drink. You are grumpy when your caffeine levels are low." "I am not grumpy," Sawyer said, taking the mug. "I am overwhelmed. Do you know how much 5 kids eat? The grocery bill is higher than the station's GDP." "We will manage," Maris said from the living room, where she was helping Maisie and Nova with their homework. "I got a job at the docking bay today. Apparently I am very good at intimidating cargo haulers into paying their fees." "I bet you are," Sawyer smiled. The door chime rang. "It is Uncle Damien," Pip shouted, sprinting for the door. Damien hobbled in, still using a cane, but looking much better. He was carrying a box of donuts. "I come bearing gifts," Damien announced. "And legal papers. The High Council officially processed the adoption forms this morning. Sawyer, my friend, you are legally the father of a multi-species platoon. Congratulations. You can never sleep again." "Thanks, Damien," Sawyer said, taking a donut. He looked around the room. Milo was showing Ash how to hack a toaster. Pip was riding the vacuum cleaner. Sable and Maris were arguing playfully about who was going to cook dinner. Neither of them could cook. Maisie was laughing at something Nova said. It was loud. It was messy. It was chaotic. It was perfect. Sawyer walked over to the window. He looked out at the stars. The jump gate was calm today, a silent ring of light in the distance. He touched the watch on his wrist. It was still broken frozen at the time Elena died. He unclasped it. "What are you doing?" Sable asked, coming up beside him. "Time passes anyway," Sawyer murmured, reading the inscription. He placed the watch on the sill. "I don't need to carry the time anymore. I have enough right here." He turned back to the room. "Who wants pizza?" Sawyer asked. "Me," 5 voices shouted in unison. "I want anchovies," Maris added. "Disgusting." Maisie wrinkled her nose. "Dad, tell her that is illegal." "In this house," Sawyer said, putting his arm around Sable and pulling Maris into the hug. The only law is that we eat together, even if it is gross fish pizza. Our house is, finally. Maisie looked at the shouting, laughing group, and then at her dad. She smiled. Noisy in the right way. Sawyer Cade laughed. It was a real laugh, deep and unburdened. Yeah, he said. It is.